In April 2023, I agreed the purchase of this property for £112,000. In July, I did a small renovation project, and in August, I rented it out to a tenant and became a landlord. A landlord that's convinced about the long-term investment returns from investing into the UK property market, with the goal being not for it to just create wealth within my lifetime, but for the potential to create generational wealth that could be passed down. So today I'm going to share my relatively inexperience of being a landlord, along with the 4 key reasons why I decided to invest into the UK property market, despite this year being the year of high interest rates. So from the 3 months or so that I've been a landlord so far, it's been a pretty steep learning curve. From acquiring a property through a limited company, which is certainly far more complex than just your normal residential purchase, right the way through to selecting the tenant and actually having the tenant moved in. And dealing with solicitors, estate agents, mortgage brokers, all of which came with their own individual challenges, along with some hidden fees along the way too. I put a lot of it down to my own personal inexperience, but I guess one of the best ways to learn is just by simply getting your hands dirty. You can read as many books or watch as many YouTube videos as you want, but nothing really replaces that real life experience. But here we are 3 months in with a tenant paying rent, but it hasn't been without some minor challenges and issues along the way. The first one being I had a couple of issues at the application stage, whereby one applicant that I'd originally chosen, once we got further down the line of doing certain checks, it was just one red flag after another. And as I said, as an inexperienced landlord, I wanted a clean-cut application, as easy as it comes, to give me the highest probability that I would have little to no issues throughout the course of the tenancy. But luckily we had another applicant which had a professional background, and he also provided a guarantor too, which pretty much guarantees me at least the next 12 months worth of rent. And obviously as someone new to the game, this gives me a little bit more confidence going into things. However, that was until during month 2 that the rent was actually 5 days late. Now, I don't totally blame the tenant for this one. Actually, I kind of blame the managing agent, who probably didn't onboard them properly, or at least go and check that they had everything set up in the correct way. The tenant believed a direct debit had been set up, but the estate agent required a standing order. So because of that, there were some unnecessary delays, I guess you could say, for me getting my rent. But this month's rent was actually on time, so at least there's kind of no major issues, I guess you could say, or at least no issues that couldn't be solved within a couple of days or so. But it certainly did create some stressful moments. But putting the challenges aside for one moment, one of the core reasons why I invested into property was because of the rewards from doing so.
Show me the money!
So let's touch upon those 4 key reasons why I actually became a landlord and invested into the UK property market. Starting off with my company structure. Look, let me be honest with you guys, if I didn't have this YouTube channel, I wouldn't have been in a position to start buying out investment properties. I still work a full-time job, which is enough to pay my bills and mortgage, savings and investments and all that kind of stuff. And because of that, all of the money that I make from YouTube simply just sits in a business account. The reason for this is it makes little to no sense for me to withdraw my YouTube income as a second source of income, because I'd get absolutely slapped by the tax man, even more so than what I do already. So I thought the best thing to do with this YouTube money that I've newly come to acquire is to actually use it for something productive and fund a new business venture. Now, the way this works is my YouTube business, which is a limited company, loans money to my other limited company, which is my property business. It's basically the perfect way for me to utilize my returned earnings from my YouTube business and actually get a return on that money that would otherwise just be sat in a bank account doing nothing. So let's dive into the topic of returns in a little bit more detail, because ultimately that's the juicy bit on how you can actually get a good return on investment from investing into property. So let's start off with talking about the monthly yield. Interest rates are great right now if you're a saver. There are plenty of easy access bank accounts offering up to 4 and 5% in interest. But for business accounts, it's quite different. Actually, interest rates aren't really that good at all. Right now, I've got an easy access HSB saver, which pays me about 1.8%. So naturally, the returns from property have been certainly quite a bit higher, with my current rental yield being at 8.84%. And that yield is calculated by taking the monthly rental figure of £825 and multiplying it by 12 months, and then dividing it by the total cost of the property, which was £112,000. Now, I definitely couldn't get that rate of return if I just had that money sat in my bank account. So using that money to obtain a yield of 8.84% is certainly really good. But that is only one part of the return on investment equation, because we also have to take into consideration how much equity I'm building up within my investment portfolio too, because the aim of the game over the long term is to increase that equity figure. And there's one very simple reason for doing that. and that's to secure my future. Buying a property or even multiple properties, in my opinion, is a fantastic way in order to supplement a pension, especially because pensions by and large actually don't fulfill on the expectations that many people have for them. For most of you guys watching this video, you're probably paying to a pension, you've probably got no idea what you're actually investing into, probably got no idea how much you're paying in fees for a company to manage that pension pot, only to hope in 20, 30, 40 years from now that there's enough money in the pot in order to allow you to retire before you've got one foot in the grave. Now, based on data from 2021, the average pension pot here in the UK was valued at just £42,000, which is actually less than 1/5 of the recommended amount that you need to retire on. So fundamentally, the pension system as we know it today certainly isn't delivering the financial security that people are requiring later on in life. So properties, in my view, especially those that can be paid off over time, aren't just going to be able to provide you with just purely passive income, which is mostly going to be all profit, but also you're going to have the option to sell it and withdraw all of the equity minus some taxes, which could give you a great lump sum on top of your pension. And ultimately, that's kind of the plan for me. UK property over the last 70 years or so has an inflationary adjusted return on investment of 5.2% per year. Now let's just assume I only ever acquire that one investment property that I paid £112,000 for, which is currently valued now at about £119,000. If I held onto that property for 30 years, acquiring a 5.2% rate of return, actually after that 30-year period, the property would be worth a whopping £564,000. Now, of course, that assumes the steady rate of return of the UK property market over many, many decades, which of course isn't always the case. But to have injected roughly about £36,000 into the property itself in order to be able to acquire it, in order to get returns upwards of £500,000 30 years from now, are returns that I'm certainly pretty happy with. Now look, one of the biggest concerns for investors right now is actually the threat of a property market crash as a result of rising interest rates. But actually my mindset and the fourth reason why I invested into property wasn't because of the stress of the short-term fluctuations of the market. And actually it's more geared around the long-term changes around affordability, along with lifestyle changes too. Which brings me on quite nicely to talk about generation rent. Look, whether you agree with it or not, recent studies show that nearly 1/3 of millennials will never own a home. Home ownership rates in the UK were about 65% as at 2019, and those rates have been falling, especially amongst the younger generations. The reality is now it's taking the younger generations longer and longer in order to get on the property ladder, with less than 30% of millennials having bought a property by age 30, compared to over 50% of baby boomers who were able to buy one before their 30th birthday. And that's thanks to the disproportionate increase in house prices over income, making it harder now than ever before to buy a property. Here you can see the average property prices by year versus the multiple of income required in order to buy that same property. We've gone from a relatively affordable 3.5 times income in the late 90s to now requiring closer to 11 times income in 2021. Now look, those numbers are slightly different depending on each geographical location that you look in, but generally speaking we can certainly summarize that property prices now are proportionately more expensive for the younger generation than the older generation that bought properties 20 or 30 years ago. And because of that, there is a growing trend that more and more people are renting. And with that obviously comes an opportunity for those in a position that can afford to buy, because the demand for rental properties continues to increase, which makes this business model one that hopefully will stand the test of time, or at least within my lifetime anyway. All of these factors combined, amongst some others, are the reasons why I personally decided to invest into the UK property market, and why I also hope and have the ambition to continue investing into properties over the course of the coming years ahead. Now look, all of this certainly didn't come overnight. 10 years ago I was actually working in McDonald's, and now life looks quite different. So look, if you'd like to know how I got to this point and how I structured my finances in order to be able to acquire investment property, then be sure to click on this video next. But before you go, be sure to subscribe to the channel, drop a like on the video as well guys, and with that being said, see you over in the next one.